Well, welcome everyone in the room and everyone online to the BirdLife International and Friends of BirdLife International Conservation Briefing. If you're new to BirdLife, our mission is to protect birds and nature so that all life on the planet can flourish. We do it by protecting vulnerable species, conserving the most vital habitats, working to make human activities more sustainable, and rallying society to take positive action against climate change and biodiversity loss. And we've been doing it for over 100 years, working with national partners in 115 countries around the globe. Partnership is what makes us different than our peers and what makes us so effective. We are delighted to have Tharcisse Ukizintambara, Partnership and Capacity Development Coordinator for BirdLife Africa, to launch our first conservation briefing here in our New York City office. Tharcisse is a passionate nature conservationist, researcher, and manager of biodiversity projects and environmental programs, an educator and mentor with over 20 years of leadership experience in Africa. He has a PhD in environmental studies from Antioch University in Keene, New Hampshire, and is in New York City because he's part of a new conservation leadership program cohort. CLP, as it's known, is a prestigious leadership development program that was established by WCS, FFI, and BirdLife. One of the things Tharcisse did not tell me that you may want to know is that Tharcisse became an avid ice skater in Keene, New Hampshire. Ice skating is one of my favorite activities. And so I wish it was a little colder here in New York City, and I would have taken you, Tharcisse, skating in Central Park or Bryant Park, but it's all closed down. I want to thank you, Tharcisse, for stopping by to give us this conservation briefing on Africa. We look forward to the presentation and the conversation we will have both here in the room and online. And if you are online, we want to ask you, if you have a question, to please use the Q&A section of the chat, and Kelly Rosenheim, who's here in the room, will work with me to get that question in the room. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Tharcisse. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, AJ. Just to get things straight, I don't skate anymore. Yeah, because there is no ice in Africa, so I actually forgot. I don't know how to go around on the skate. So I'm going to share my screen. Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you for being online. And today I'm going to talk about BirdLife and its activities in Africa. So yeah, I will start off talking about myself. It's not my favorite topic, but I'd like to tell you how I became a conservationist. And I also talk about the modus operandi of BirdLife International, and also what I do and what we do in Africa. And in particular, my section on partnership and capacity development. And of course, I repeat again a little bit of why I'm here in New York. So I came across this story, which I relate to very much. It's about this Rockefeller sunbird. And I think also it will have some relation with New York. So a field expert from Chicago Museum was in my country, in Rwanda, and he was trying to do inventories of species. And one of the hunters brought him this species, the Rockefeller sunbird. Yeah, this is a species I grew up with. I know them very well. There are many species in the country. We have over 26 species. They are very intriguing, very difficult to tear apart. They look like hummingbirds. And the females look all alike. So it's not easy if you don't see a male to tear them apart. So that's why I spent a lot of time looking at these species. But Josh Angel wrote in his field guide this note. A male and two juveniles were brought to me by Hunter. We were not, we never got a chance to ask him to show us where he captured them from. We ended up having to pack up camps sooner than expected. On the very day we had planned to on climbing to higher plateau where the bird lives. So the way I connected this story is because growing up, growing up in Rwanda, this is Rwanda, very small country. It's almost the size of New Jersey. And it's a very mountainous. The altitude starts from 3,000 up to 14,000 feet above the sea level. So that's why I grew up. I grew up, and in higher mountains it's actually quite cold. So that's why I was very comfortable in Keene when I was there a couple of years ago. So Rwanda experienced a lot of civil wars, and most of actually my studies were also cut short because of that. And that's why I relate a lot to this story of a field expert from Chicago. So we, about 30 years ago, we experienced one of the atrocities of genocide. And that's why some people remember Rwanda about that. But we are also very well known for mountain gorillas. I think many people go to Rwanda to see mountain gorillas. And now the country is actually recovering and doing a lot of progress in terms of conservation. We were, I think, the very first country to abolish plastics. So if you go to Rwanda, you will never find plastics anywhere in the country. So it's a good model for Africa and actually for the world at the moment. That when I was growing up also, I had a passion for science and I wanted to become a biologist. So that's why because of the war, I was able to join conservation organizations all over the world. So I became a citizen of the world. I've been working in the Congo. I went to Gabon. I actually spent a lot of time in Madagascar and other countries where I was studying or researching or teaching almost all over the world. So that's my story. And I joined BirdLife early on. I was part of the people who created the wildlife clubs in Rwanda. We also created the local organizations for conservation. And that's why I think BirdLife spotted me. And now I am coordinating the partnership and also the capacity development for our organizations in Africa. Last year, I was privileged to go to the World Congress in the UK. That was the centenary anniversary of BirdLife. And this is Congress, that's where BirdLife launched its strategy. And the strategy, as EJ was talking about, consists on working on birds. So birds are our umbrella. We work on birds in whatever we do, although we do also work on other species. We work on sites, mostly the important bird areas and key biodiversity areas, and on systems. And this is where we intervene and help people to rectify and work and do good business and also clean industries. With society, we work from the local people to the international agreements to campaign and advocate for nature and for birds. So those are our pillars, which I come back to in a minute. But we also focus on these two foundations. So partnership is very important for BirdLife and also science. So we rely on facts and we take our decisions from the information we collect from the field. This is the shoebill, and it's a bird which is found in the pristine wetlands in East Africa, from Zambia all the way up to Sudan. So it shows the health of a wetland. If the wetland is not very clean or very healthy, you won't find this species. So in Africa, we call ourselves BirdLife Secretariat. So we have 3 offices. One is in Nairobi, and that's where that's like the headquarters for BirdLife Africa. We have another one in Senegal, in Dakar, that covers West Africa. But we also have an office in Sao Tome and Principe. This is a small island in the Atlantic, and it's a very special island because about 9 species are critically endangered on this island. So we have a lot of activities working with local people to restore habitat, to protect these species, and to bring them out of extinction risk. So last year, we had a budget of about $5 million US, and this budget helps us to run projects and also programs and the staff. We have about 36 staff in these 3 offices. Dr. Kariuki Ndanganga is our regional director, and we also have Jean-Baptiste Defontaine, who is our deputy regional director based in Dakar. So we work on these programs, preventing extinctions, important bird areas, and migratory birds and flyways, on forest programs and marine programs. Also, these cross-cutting programs, including fundraising, policy and advocacy, communication, partnership, and capacity development, which I run in Africa. So, as I said, we work on birds. Africa has about 2,500 bird species, and these birds help us to know the health of the environment in Africa. Unfortunately, most of these birds are threatened because we have a growing population and everyone is destroying their habitats. Some people go out and kill species, so they are really threatened. About 276 species are globally threatened in Africa. And for the partnership, this is the major foundation of BirdLife. We have 26 partners in Africa, found in these green countries, so from Ethiopia down to South Africa, including Madagascar, Mauritius, and Seychelles, and also Northern Africa, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, and West Africa. We still have some gaps in Africa, but we are trying to reach out and recruit more partners. So these partners have about 500 staff working for them all across the continent, and 90 members because BirdLife is a membership-based organization. So we try to encourage our partners to recruit members, but it's a slow endeavor. For the countries we haven't covered yet, but we work with them through these transboundary and transnational programs. For example, this is the East Atlantic Flyway, all the way from Greenland down to Southern Africa. And we work all along, even where we don't have partners, we work in those countries, for example, Namibia, Angola, all along the flyway. We also have another initiative called the Great Green Wall initiative, and this is covering the Sahara. Sahara, this is this arid environment between the Sahara and the tropical forest. So we are trying to work with these countries. Sometimes we don't have partners, but we try to work with local partners to protect the birds. And this area is very critical for migratory birds, especially the round birds, which migrate from Europe. They cross the Sahara and they need to stop to feed in the Sahel. So they need water, they need fruits and insects, and it's a very important place. Luckily, we hope it'll be green very soon with this initiative. So we work in total in about 40 countries because of these transboundary initiatives, out of 54 countries in Africa. For science, BirdLife, you work on science, as I said, it's our foundation. So we are a bird authority for the red list of IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. We do a lot of monitoring of important bird areas, which have also initiated work on key biodiversity areas and other partnership of different organizations. We populate the database based on birds information, and we also publish a lot. So BirdLife is one of the major cited organizations. We can even compete with major universities with the publications we have on the continent and globally. So I would like to stop a little bit here, and if you have a question before I dive into the pillars of BirdLife, so you can ask about myself or where I come from, and BirdLife in Africa, and also our foundations, the partnership and science activities we have in Africa. So if you have any questions, can you ask before we talk about the pillars of BirdLife International?
We have them online, so we'll start on. Tharcisse, the shoebill looks like a dinosaur. Is this an ancient bird species? Is its population stable? Thank you, and that is from Julie Beard. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. That's right. Yeah, the shoebill, as you saw on the picture, yeah, it looks like a dinosaur very much. I am not very sure if it's very ancient, but yeah, I guess could be. Its population, because of a lot of activities happening in Africa, especially in wetlands, people try to, this is an area where most of the pesticides or other chemicals will run down. And also people try to destroy the wetlands to grow rice and other crops which require a lot of water. So the bird is not very stable. It's found, I think the most stable population is found in Uganda. Others are just pockets of individuals, but they are thriving. So it's probably going to increase with all the efforts we are doing, especially around Lake Victoria, one of the biggest lake in Africa. So the bird is thriving, but the population is not very high. Thank you.
I have a question, and you may be covering this in your talk, in which case just please tell me. But would you be able to explain a little bit about important bird areas and key biodiversity areas, and sort of how you manage them in Africa? I mean, I'm kind of curious, frankly, as an aside, if a lot of your KBAs in Africa are wetlands or what the habitat is. So it's a two-part question. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I come back to that, but in Africa, we have now about 1,200 important bird areas all across the continent. And those were established a long time ago, probably 20 years ago. So this is really a currency BirdLife uses to run conservation on the continent. And there will be wetlands KBAs, forest KBAs, there's even some coastal IBAs, I mean. And IBAs, of course, are important bird areas. They were designed to protect endangered birds found in those ecosystems. And now the KBA, which is a consortium of different organizations, and they are trying to include, beside birds, include other taxa for conservation. So key biodiversity areas will include plants and amphibians and other species. And sometimes they will be smaller than IBAs, or sometimes they become bigger than IBAs. So there is a lot of discussion. Usually people are very interested in KBAs, are promoting this because we have a big consortium working on the KBAs, but there is a lot of back and forth trying to map the KBAs in Africa. The country which is more advanced on these activities is South Africa, with BirdLife South Africa, but other countries like Kenya and Nigeria are also catching up. But KBA monitoring requires, of course, a lot of knowledge. You need to know birds, you need to know insects and other species. It's a little challenging, but I think it's better to use this protocol to conserve the biodiversity. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
Tharcisse, one of your colleagues, Liz Autumn, chimed in the Q&A to let us know that the shoe bill is vulnerable, listed as vulnerable. So that's the answer to that.
Thank you.
Right, let's keep going, Tharcisse.
All right. So the pillars of BirdLife, as I mentioned, these four, the species, sites, systems, and society. For species, we do a lot of work to save species in Africa. And one of our programs is preventing extinction. For example, in Mauritius, they are having a lot of success to grow the number of population of endangered species. Some of them were down to 2 individuals. Now they are making, they are growing up to 200, 300, including the Mauritius kestrel you can see here. This became a national bird for Mauritius, and they are protecting them all across the island. There are many other species which are very endangered on the island. Some of them, of course, went extinct, like the dodo you hear. It's from this same island. We also work on saving seabirds. And this is a big effort, especially with the bycatch, which is increasing on the oceans around Africa. Some countries and some programs have become very successful. For example, in Namibia, they were able to bring down the bycatch on albatrosses, and they have a success of 98% reduction in bycatch in Namibia at the moment. We also work on the flagship species, like migratory bird species and other birds which are very useful to map some of the landscapes, and common birds. So we also want common birds to remain common. We don't want to lose them. For example, this is called African common bulbul. It's very common. It's found almost everywhere. For the ocean, we have a program called the Guardian of the Sea. And these are the people who actually jump on the boats, the fishing boats, and they help the fishermen to save birds and other species which are caught within bycatch, and they monitor that, and they help the species to go back, or they bring them into clinics if they have problems. So the Guardians of the Sea are really helping a lot, especially on the West African side of Atlantic Ocean. And in saving the species, we have a problem with vultures. So 7 out of 11 species of vultures in Africa are critical endangered or endangered. So the reason why these vultures are in trouble is because it's different from what happened in Asia. It's because in Africa, there are multiple threats. So people are poisoning them. When they're trying to poison, for example, the carnivorous, which feeds on their cattle, so they poison them, and then the vultures will also come and get affected. There is also a problem called the belief-based use of vultures. There are many traditional healers who believe that vultures have a lot of medicinal values. So they trap them, they kill them, they use their body parts for medicinal purposes. And this is very big, but we are working with those healers. We are also working with farmers to create environments, vulture-safe zones, especially in Southern Africa. We have almost 1 million hectares where the vultures can get fed. We call them the vulture restaurants, and people in those neighborhoods don't hunt them usually. So that is happening, and also we are working with other industries, especially energy, to rectify the cables and the power lines to avoid electrocution and collisions. And this is an area, of course, where Pilgrim Fund is also supporting us very much, especially in Kenya. So this threat is happening almost everywhere. And this map, of course, shows where we have partners and where we are working with them, and the threats which are found in East Africa and especially in West Africa. So here we don't have partners, but there are also some threats in those areas. But with the efforts, we hope the vultures will survive. But it's a big endeavor. So we have a lot of projects in these countries to save the vultures for the moment. And for the sites, that was your question about important bird areas. As I said, we have 1,200 important bird areas in Africa, and those are also mixed with key biodiversity areas. And many countries are still working on key biodiversity areas. So it's not really sorted yet, but we have advancement in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and other countries also are catching up to monitor the key biodiversity areas and also map them on the landscape. We work on conserving forests. There is a big project in the Guinean forest of West Africa that is between Cameroon and Guinea on this Guinean forest of West Africa. We also have projects working on the East Afro-Montane forest, and that's usually around Rwanda, Uganda, Eastern DRC, Congo, and other countries. And there are also many projects on the forest of Madagascar, working with our partners, BirdLife partner in the country. There are a lot of efforts to restore habitats and sites through the project like Trillion Trees and Afri 100. So some countries have pledged to restore habitats, and by the year 2030, we'd like to have 1 million hectares of habitat restored. There are also projects eradicating invasive species. One of the key projects is in South Africa. It's called Mouse-Free Marion. Marion is an island in South Africa towards Antarctica, and it's invaded by rats and mice, which affect the breeding of albatrosses, the petrels, and other marine species. So BirdLife South Africa is working very hard to eradicate these mice by the year 2025. So they're making a lot of progress, and we hope this will happen. So this is an image of wandering albatrosses on Marion. So we hope that there will be many more cottering and breeding on the island. For the sites, we work on transboundary sites. I mentioned the flyway, like the East Atlantic Flyway. We have the Great Green Wall, but there's also this new initiative called Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area. This is one of the biggest landscape conservation area in the world, about 100 million acres, and it's between Angola, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. It also includes a lot of protected areas, but this is an area where you find a lot of species of birds, about 600 species or more, and also large populations of elephants. So this is a very important place. There are projects starting in the area to help local people, including this one called the BirdLife birding route. This is for ecotourism, and tourists can take this route almost like on a pilgrimage, and they go around and visit many species of birds. So another pillar of BirdLife are systems. So we are working very hard to reshape the systems. As you can see on this figure, agriculture is one of the systems which are affecting birds. So they destroy the habitats for species. There is also logging and wood harvesting. There are some problems with climate change and hunting and others. So we are working to redesign production system so that they can be human to birds and nature. We are providing technical expertise to partners working in fisheries to avoid bycatch, for example, forest management, agroforestry, energy production. Some countries have actually agreed to retrofit dangerous power lines, 7 countries in Africa. So they use engineering system to make sure that the power lines don't affect especially soaring bird species and vultures and others. In these systems, especially looking at the agriculture system, we have a project called the Climate Smart Agriculture. This is a project which is covering 6 countries in Africa, 3 in East Africa and 3 in West Africa. And one of the iconic project is BBB project, which are birds, bees, and business. And this is a unique project run by women in Burkina Faso, in West Africa. So the women create gardens in this area. It's also in the Sahel, and it's very arid and dry. And those gardens will attract bees. The bees will pollinate plants, and the plants will grow, and also birds will come in, and they can harvest honey. And they also have special trees where they collect shea butter. It's a very popular plant for skin products, etc., etc. Very productive in terms of income. So these women are making money from honey and from bee shea butter in Burkina Faso. And this is a project which can be scaled up along the Sahel and other countries in Africa. So the example I gave here of the impact of agriculture is the one in Madagascar. Madagascar does a system of slash and burn agriculture. And this is an image from the NASA showing the fires in Madagascar in 2015. You can see a lot of fires all along the country. So these fires will destroy the forests and the landscape for the rice cultivation and the other crops like cassava and the others. So it's a big threat, agriculture, but we are managing and trying to bring these ideas of climate smart agriculture and other systems to minimize the impact of clear cutting the land and using the means of agroforestry, for example. The other pillar is society. So the society, we engage indigenous people, local communities, women, and the youth for the conservation, and these people can also decide how they use their resources. So we involve these people who own the land most of the time, so they can work and protect the environment. So this is a picture of the Maasai people in Kenya or Tanzania. They are deciding what they are going to do with the vulture issues in the area. We also run campaigns, advocacy campaigns from local with national governments up to the higher level of international agreements. So there are many campaigns in Africa, especially some fights with petrol companies, with mining companies, with logging companies, a lot of going on. Sometimes we win the cases, sometimes we don't. It depends on the government, especially when they decide to give away land or a mining site. It's very difficult to go around. But with the power of partnership with all the members we have around the world, sometimes we make a big voice and it can get heard. So that's, I think, the power of BirdLife International in conservation. And the partnership is a unit where I work with very much. So what I do is the countries, for example, where we don't have partners, we go in, we try to talk to local organizations, we assess them using a quality assurance system to see if they have really the criteria to be members of BirdLife. One of those criteria is also, of course, to be a democratic organization with good governance. They have good management. They also have some skills in research and conservation. Sometimes they won't have everything, so that's why you have capacity, and we develop their capacity. We are now working with many partners to have a strategic plan, which is very important because some people just walk the way they wake up and they do whatever they want. But we want them to have a strategy, like a 5-year strategy, which they follow and they can measure their achievements. So strategic plan is a key. And there is also training on fundraising, training on monitoring and evaluation, communication to make these organizations visible, and they publish their stories so the world can know what is going on in those areas. So that's one of my work, but we train people and institutions. We also support the youth. For example, we are trying to put up a master degree in ornithology in Senegal. So we, as BirdLife, we support this university so that they can run an ornithology program which will also give us staff. When they finish, they can come and work for BirdLife at the end of their studies. So we work from the lower grassroots all the way to the academic training in Africa and elsewhere. Then why I came to New York, because EJ explained that I'm here for the Conservation Leadership Program. So with a consortium between BirdLife, FFI, and WCS, we provide grants for young conservationists. This year we had applications of 200 people, and they brought them down to 37. So next Wednesday and Thursday, we have a group of panelists. We are going to assess those applications, and we come up with 17 leaders, young leaders who will receive scholarships. The scholarships, these grants vary from $15,000 to $25,000. So that's why I'm here. I'm working on these applications and trying to select the best young people who are going to receive these awards. Yeah, this program has been going on for a while. So these are the numbers of countries and young people who receive the grants all around the world, focusing on low-income countries and developing countries. So there are projects on all taxa, not only birds, there are plants, there are marine species. We focus mostly on endangered species. So anyone who's working on endangered species and they have a very good project, well designed, they most likely receive these grants. So we will have some announcement maybe by the end of the week. So BirdLife cannot work, of course, without funds. And I mentioned that by last year, we probably rose about $5 million. And we've been doing quite well. From 2019, we had about $4.5 million. And they are projecting to have around 7 million by 2025. But these are efforts of the of our groups. So everyone almost in the office fundraise. What happened, especially last year, we've been getting a lot of grants from MAVA Foundation, but this foundation closed down last year. So we are working very hard to fill the gap and keep our trend of growth going. We have some organizations which are really supporting us throughout, like partners or BirdLife in Europe, like RSPB in UK, or VBN in the Netherlands, or NABU in Germany, and others. But we would like to have some flexible grants which don't rely on projects, because a project comes and goes, and that's what happens if that is we lose staff. So someone is managing a project, when it ends, yeah, they have to go. So we'd like to have funds and support to keep those programs going, not relying on projects all the time. And it's also energy consuming for the staff who are working on that. But before MAVA closed down last year, they purchased an office for the BirdLife West Africa in Dakar. And this is 2 weeks ago, when the head of MAVA Foundation inaugurated the building in the middle of Dakar in Senegal. So that was a big and good legacy from the foundation, but we are working very hard to fill the gap of what they left. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, and I am free for more questions if you have, and if you need more details. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, so Tharcisse, we have a question from Ian Davidson, who says, "Hi, Tharcisse, great to see you today. Can you describe how BLI works with our northern partners on issues related to shared flyway birds, and in particular, how partners are addressing some of the hunting issues along Africa's northern borders with the Mediterranean?"
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So on the Mediterranean border, we have 3 partners. In Egypt, we have Nature Conservation Egypt, and we have the Association Amis des Oiseaux in Tunisia, and Grepom in Morocco. So the foundation I mentioned, MAVA, has actually has been funding those partners on African part and also in the European part. We have partners in Spain, Portugal, Italy, who have been collaborating along the Mediterranean and working on species crossing the ocean. Unfortunately, this area, especially called these Arab areas, many people like hunting. So they have like falconry, they have a lot of activities of hunting. So we've been having projects on the Egyptian side between Egypt and the Middle East. We've been having a project called Migratory Soaring Birds. And this was really looking at ways to decrease the hunting and rodenticide, for example, affecting soaring birds. And also there is a big threat on energy, power lines, electrocution, and collusion. So this project really has been working along the what we call the Red Sea Rift Valley Flyway to protect this species. Yeah, there were some challenges, but also some successes. Some countries, as I said, agreed to rectify their power lines or to divert the sites where they are set on bottleneck of the flyway, and that has been happening. In Morocco, there are also projects going on, especially on vultures and other species migrating from Europe, especially on wetlands. So trying to protect the wetlands, the remaining one in the country. I think Morocco is doing very well. We have a good partner in the country, but of course the birds don't stop there. They keep coming down in places where we have partners and where we don't. So it's a big challenge. In the Mediterranean, we also have a project called Illegal Killing of Birds. So that's a focus on protecting birds which are targeted by hunters. It's a big challenge. That project, I think, is still going on and making some progress. So I guess I can stop there. I don't know if I answered your question very well, but those are the information I have for the moment. We can still find more information from my colleagues and we'll share when possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tharcisse. Maybe open it up to the room for a question if there is one.
Sorry, I arrived late, but Monica told me everything about it.
Welcome. Any questions or questions online?
We do, we have one more question. Since some people kill vultures for medicine, is there an educational program to tell people how vultures are important in the environment?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, that's a starting point because we know that vultures are actually cleaners of the environment, and that's a starting point because when there are carcasses in the bush and in the villages, they come and they clean this up. So people understand that, but traditional healers, because they get income from that business, so they are very resistant. My colleagues who are working on a program of saving vultures are really working very closely with the traditional healers, and they're trying to find alternatives. What else can cure the diseases they will be talking about beside vulture parts? So they are making some progress in Nigeria and also Tanzania, but it's very slow. Talking to the traditional healers who have had these beliefs for all these years and trying to change their minds, it's not very easy. But the idea that the vultures are very important in the ecosystem is really coming up. We show that, we give the examples, and the people actually know about that. The reason why actually vultures are very much affected, it seems people are also very observant. They see the vultures flying, soaring in the sky, and they found it really majestic. This is a bird which is very smart, and they know they last for a very long time, and they know they can see the carcasses from far away. So they have very good eyesight, and that's what the traditional healers use to convince people that if you take this, you'll be very smart, you'll live long, you'll have a good life, and you can. Yeah, maybe you can fly. So it's it's very amazing to change those beliefs from the people that we are trying.
Any more questions online?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the most like a territory worry about it?
Really?
What's the most place worry about the conservation?
The most in Africa. Yeah. That's a very good question.
I'm sorry, Tharcisse, people online can't hear questions from over here, so you have to repeat her question.
Yeah, the question is where we are most worried in terms of conservation of birds in Africa, I think. That's your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mentioned about Sao Tome and Principe. This is a very small island. I don't know where to compare this island with, maybe Stellan Island, I'm not sure. And this island has a very endemic species. So they are not found anywhere else on the continent, and nine of them are critically endangered. So islands, they get very affected very much because the birds, of course, cannot move out. And if they are invasive species, if the habitat is destroyed through agriculture and logging, and there are also now climate change issues and invasive species issues on the islands. So those really gets hit very much. So we are very concerned with islands. We have projects in Sao Tome and Principe, as I mentioned. We have some projects in Cape Verde, which is another Portuguese island. Sao Tome is also Portuguese. And in Cape Verde, we worry about seabirds. They also have problems in the country, but we have a very dynamic organization trying to protect those species, clean up the beaches, and protect the species. So islands are very critical, and now with wetlands also, it's a big problem. Some wetlands, especially in the cities or near the cities, we have effects of sewage systems and other garbage dumping, etc., etc. So those are very affected, wetlands and islands. But also, of course, the forests are being destroyed because in some areas they want to plant palm trees for palm oil. Other places they want to plant monoculture of other species. So it's very, very hard to tell where we have more problems. But islands are very affected. Arid areas like the Sahel are very, very much affected, and along the rivers also.
I'm interested in the Trillium Tree Project. How is that organized, and how is that coordinated all over Africa?
Yeah, so this I think was
You mind repeating the question?
yeah, sorry. Yeah, the question is about the trillion trees. So the person want to know how is it coordinated around Africa, in Africa, etc. So the trillion trees, I think it's an initiative which started in Germany. They actually call it the Bonn Challenge. And I guess they had governments and countries in a meeting in Bonn, and every country pledged to grow and reforest and restore habitats. So many countries already actually pledged to cover, for example, Ethiopia is the one which want to plant 15 million acres by 2030. So that's the biggest. And Ethiopia is 14.6. No, 15, and Sudan is 14.6. So these are the two countries which were pledging to really grow a lot of forests. So I think the different, especially through our partners, there are some grants, and people can grow tree nurseries like this one and give trees to the population to plant and restore the different habitats. So I think it was a governmental initiative, and NGO and other organizations and the local people are helping to grow and restore these habitats.
How is the problem involved in teaching students, the young children, is that part of the curriculum so that they prepared to participate in the development of the BirdLife?
Yeah, thank you very much. The question is how we work or teach the young people so that they can start being involved in BirdLife activities. This is very big. I mentioned the way I actually started my career was through what we call wildlife clubs. So we used to go to primary schools and we take them out with binoculars to see birds, and we try really to bring a lot of enthusiasm in them. So once they go out, of course, they can play, but they can also learn. And there are many of those programs done by our partners all across Africa. I worked on one of those projects in South Africa. It was called Living for Sustainable, Learning for Sustainable Living. So we used this, we were actually working with teachers, and we created a model where people could use birds in their curriculum. So when you're learning mathematics, you can use flyways and have birds fly, how many kilometers, what is the speed, etc., etc. So we had a booklet for that, and it was very, very amazing that you can use birds in languages and mathematics and physics and biology, of course, to teach at the school. So BirdLife adopted that. In some other countries in Africa. We also have a program which is also very unique. It's called Spring Alive, and it's a mix of European students and African students. They selected 6 migratory birds, very common ones, like the white stork and some of the bee eaters, and so they track them. So the kids will track the birds from Europe when they start coming down in fall, and they map where they go and how many they are. And then once they reach Africa, the Africans also will collect the data, and they populate on their website, and they will be tracking these birds back and forth. That's a very amazing project. It's called Spring Life, which brings a lot of work with kids. It's mostly like high school students, because who can access internet and communicate with their peers in Europe and in Africa. So that's there are many programs like that.
Tracking them is so exciting. When they go and they learn about the countries, they learn about weather and climate and food sources, and it's so exciting. And the young people, they will never forget that.
No.
So we did one more question online, Kelly, and then we'll wrap it up.
This is from Sam. How much resources going into habitat protection versus habitat restoration?
Yeah, the question is, I think people have that. How much resources are going into habitat protection and the
Versus restoration, yeah.
versus restoration? I am I'm not gonna get the right figures, but protecting pristine habitat, it's easier. I think it's cheaper, and that's what is happening in the national parks and protected areas. So the government just delimits the area, and that will be protected, and also will bring some resources from ecotourism and others. But restoration is very tough. Like this project of trillion trees, after 100. In some countries, a seedling of a plant costs like $5. So it becomes very expensive to plant a million trees. That's what I can say, that restoration is very tough. Sometimes you need to restore the habitat. If it's a quarry, you need to cover, you need to terrace and landscape the place before planting. You need some fertilizers, you need some water, and people to monitor the growth of those plants. So it's more expensive to restore than protect an existing habitat.
Thank you, Tharcisse. I'm going to swap seats with you one more time.
Yes.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just say one more thing about trillion trees too, because it gets a little bit to the last question. Trillion trees is very focused on restoration. And it's a collaboration between WCS and WWF UK and BirdLife. If people want to learn a little bit more about that, we can send some resources out via email afterwards. But yeah, it builds on the great work that is in the Bond Challenge and other efforts to restore species. So excited that we're a partner of that and see a lot of promise in that. So I just want to say before we say goodbye to the attendees online, that I want to thank Tharcisse again for his presentation today. And I want to add a very special thank you to the Friends of BirdLife team, Kelly Rosenheim, for doing everything behind the scenes to make this such a successful event, and Monica. And then just to say, you know, on behalf of BirdLife and the Friends of BirdLife, I just want to thank you all online and everybody here in the room for coming out to our first event in New York City. We hope this won't be the last one, and we'll have some conservation briefings in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.